Welcome to Android Authority on Air, the original Android Hangout show on Google+. I'm Derek Ross.
I'm Scott Anderson.
And I'm Dan Charlton.
I'm Jonathan Franklin.
This week we are bringing you an exclusive giveaway for the Galaxy S3. So all you Galaxy S3 owners that are interested in cases for your S3, we'll get to that information in a little bit. We're also going to talk about, is Android a mess? Microsoft says it is. We're going to have a little debate style, go back and forth about that. Then we're going to get into some devices, some Samsung news, Motorola news. As usual, we'll hit up some new apps. We'll talk about Glass for a little bit. We got some rootin' and ramen stuff with AOKP. And we'll wrap up with carriers and patents as well. All right, so let's talk about this giveaway. Right now, we have these exclusive Galaxy S3 cases. They are officially licensed art by Tats Crew, the Mural Kings. And Tats Crew is actually pretty famous. They're world famous. They are Bronx-based mural street artists that have been around doing public graffiti since the 1980s. Tats Crew's iconic work has been commissioned for New York institutions, museums, schools, and major corporations. And the interesting thing about these cases for the Galaxy S3 is that you can't buy them. They're pretty exclusive. You can't buy them online. You can buy them for the iPhone 5 and for the 5th generation iPod Touch. But
soon for the S4.
And soon for the S4, but you cannot buy these for the Galaxy S3. So if you have a Galaxy S3 and you want something that you can't get anywhere, and they would normally run you $30, we're giving these away. We have 10 of them to give away. And to enter the contest, it's very simple. All you have to do is share this post on Google Plus with hashtag Android Authority so we can easily find it. And then after the show, we will tally up all the shares with hashtag Android Authority, and we will contact the winner and ship this exclusive street art designed case. Now this is just a snap-on case. It's not a front protective cover. It's just a snap-on case for the back, so to help you grip your device and provide a little bit more plastic for your plastic Galaxy S3. How about that? But it said the main thing about this is the famous design, the exclusive street art. So once again, if you have a Galaxy S3, you want to win one, or you want to win something exclusive that you can't get anywhere else, hashtag Android Authority, share this post. Moving on. All right, so we'll come back to that in a little bit for people that are tuning in late. Okay, so moving on to some news this week. So at Dive Into Mobile earlier this week, Microsoft's Terry Myerson, who is the VP of Windows Phone, had something to say. He said that Android is kind of a mess. Look at Samsung. There's clearly mutiny going on. The only OEM making money off of Android is Samsung, which we all know that Samsung is making a lot of money. They're selling tons of devices. So that's true. The main point of discussion on this is Microsoft's VP of Windows Phone saying Android is a mess. And there's been a debate going back and forth about this throughout the week. You know, is Android a mess? Is it not a mess? So what I want you to do is let us know in the comments if you think Android is a mess or if it's not a mess. And, you know, just give us your thoughts on that. And we're going to go back and forth here. We're going to talk about, you know, compare it to iOS, compare it to Windows Phone. Is it the carrier's fault? OEM, Samsung? What actually is Google's job? What is Google's role with Android? And ultimately, you know, do we think Android is a mess? So I'm going to ask Dan Charlton here. Dan, do you think Android is a mess, and what is your response to Terry's accusation?
I think yes and no is the answer to that question. And really it depends on what you're talking about when you say Android. When I talk about Android, I'm talking about AOSP, the platform itself. I don't think it's a mess at all. I think it works just like Linux works, right? You've got a group of people that contribute to the core code. They release regular updates. I'd like for them to release more regular updates, right? Like Linux is constantly being updated in public, and Android is, just incrementally done in public like that. I'd like to see it faster than that, but I get that it isn't. In that respect, though, no, it's not at all a mess. The platform is perfectly stable, perfectly fine, evolving quickly, being well maintained. What's a mess is all of the people who are not really maintaining their own forks of Android, despite the fact that they're running their own forks of Android. Right? Samsung forks Android to make it run on other devices. They don't put that information back into Google's code, and then they build their own framework on top of it. They're shipping TouchWiz for Samsung devices is their very own fork of Android. But the problem is they don't support it. They don't treat it like a fork of Android. They don't actually maintain it. They expect the carriers to support it. That's the big difference, in my opinion, between Apple and Android in this respect. Apple supports every iPhone on every carrier. You have a Verizon iPhone, you have a problem with it, you call Verizon, they're going to direct you to an Apple representative. Same thing on AT&T or Sprint or T-Mobile or anywhere else in the world. You have a Samsung phone, you call Verizon, Verizon's dealing with it. You have one from AT&T, AT&T's dealing with it. You have one from T-Mobile, they're dealing with it. So it's a big contrast there.
Okay, so the counter argument to this is, well, to rehash what you said, so you're saying that it's the OEMs and the carriers' fault because they're customizing Android. So yeah. the argument is well, whenever we look at the success of Android, we say that Android is worldwide, 70 to 75%, whatever the latest numbers are, of the market is Android. We look at this massive dominating force of Android. Yet what you just mentioned and what you just talked about wasn't that massive 70, 75%. That was, I'm going to say a number I don't even know, but we're going to say that's probably a single-digit number is what you probably just mentioned. Nexus devices, AOSP supported devices. So that's what the people on the other side of the fence are saying. How do you respond to that?
I'd say that Android is that entire 70%. That's underneath of all of it. That's the foundation that all of those little things are built on, right? It's not that Android's a mess because Samsung can't get their crap together and support their phones.
Agreed.
That's not a fault of Android. That's not a symptom of Android. That's Samsung not being good at their business.
I agree with that.
They're selling a crap load of phones, and in that regard, they're doing good business, but they aren't treating their customers well. Apple sells a crap load of phones, but they can get the absurd margins they do and the people willing to fork over crap loads of money for them like they do because they're going to follow that up with the customer service, right? That's why every Apple store is always freaking packed with the Apple fanboys because they love going in and getting that service. Samsung's not providing that. They're expecting Verizon to provide that for them or Sprint to provide that for them. They aren't doing it themselves.
All right, now, John, do you have anything that you would like to add to that? Is this Google's fault? That they are putting out code and then whatever anybody wants to do with it, they have no control over it. But the other side of the fence here is saying that that's the problem, that Google has no control once they put the code out there.
Well, it's not a problem. That was the intent. It's not necessarily a problem that it's open because as a development platform, Android has worked very well for them because even with the Nexus, even before the Nexus, you had the code, and by the time really developers have had their hands on, developers generally buy Nexus devices or even are given Nexus devices. By the time Samsung comes out with their version of 4.2.2, the developers' apps are up to snuff. It's stable. You don't have to worry about even iOS suffers from development. Everybody jumps on the new platform simultaneously where developers haven't had that much time to work with it, and you have more issues with applications force closing and giving out. So from the perspective of development, it works well. From the perspective of the users, I don't think it necessarily is a bad thing that like what Dan was talking about with Samsung, if the person is happy with their phone, I have somebody like, say, my mom, and she's perfectly happy. She has a Galaxy S3. they don't really think about whether they're on the latest version of the software. They just care that it works. The thing is, the people that do care about it should have the option to get a pure, if they want a Nexus device, that needs to be available to them everywhere, on every carrier globally. If as long as the consumers get what they want, that's really all that it boils down to and matters. And if the consumers have that choice but don't have the choice that they want, that's when it becomes a mess or a problem in my eyes. I mean, if obviously they got so much market share that it's working. It's just a question of, is everybody happy, or does everybody know what they want? Are they capable of being happy? If that question remains yes, then that's all that matters.
All right, Scott, in regards to everything that John and Dan had said and what I had said, do you have anything you would wish to add to this discussion?
Yeah, going back to the initial comment of, mutiny with Samsung and Android, the whole takeover mutiny of the whole ecosystem of Android from Samsung is kind of far-fetched, and it can't happen because they have to have some underlying features in order to, have it. The Play Store, all the Google apps. So ideally, it's working for Google. But the issue is basically update time, and that in lies, the biggest problem, that definitely people have the choice whether to buy a device that is updated or not. But the thing is, in order to do that, you have to be somewhat educated on what phone to buy and who to buy it from. So therein lies kind of the problem, I guess.
And I agree that is a problem that you shouldn't have. A consumer should be able to buy relatively any phone and assume they're going to get the support that they desire. And that just doesn't happen all the time, unfortunately. And Google can do their best to help mitigate this by releasing such things as the platform development kit. And they can have OEMs and manufacturers use this and help, which will help them get code available before it's publicly released, to help them get updates out in a timely manner. If an OEM doesn't use this or doesn't take advantage of this tool, then that's really not Google's fault. They're maintaining their line of devices, Nexus devices. So this really isn't an answer, but my thoughts is, let's see what happens with the new upcoming versions of devices from Motorola. Now that Google is technically running the show, let's see how they react to this. Let's see if they also fall susceptible to the carrier. Is the carrier still going to bog down the release time frame the same way that they have in the past? Let's see what actually happens. I don't know. I can't tell the future. I would like to assume that, since rumors are that it's going to, new Motorola phones are going to just be stock Android, that it's going to be easier, and Google's behind the wheel. They're going to be timely updates. But that still doesn't solve the entire problem. That's just one manufacturer. That's Motorola. Which is a tiny sliver compared to what Samsung is able to do. So I don't know how Google can tighten this up a little bit when they're not in charge of anything after the code leaves them. I don't think that they can do that.
One thing I was going to, when you compare, say, an iOS release versus an Android release, Google doesn't have that control. But the reason Apple has that control is also because they make sure that they get all the necessary carrier approval prior to a phone release. So it's not necessarily that the process for them is faster. It's more that they hold back the process so it becomes invisible to the consumer, and then they handle all the updates after that. But they make sure ahead of time that Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, global carriers are on board before they even put the phone on the market. So the only option, realistically, because Apple suffers from this carrier problem too, is either Google holds back and doesn't release an Android version and tries to get OEMs on board kind of simultaneously prior to the next Android release, or they just keep moving forward and keep moving the platform forward. So it's really, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place as to where you take it. And really, I think that they've gone about it in about the best way that they can, considering the circumstances, because they have a lot more OEMs to keep on board than, obviously someone who's hardware controlled. But that is a big factor in it, and there's no reason to hold back Android just for the sake of an OEM. That would be like Microsoft holding back Windows for the sake of an OEM.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the problems with what Meyerson's little rant went on about, I mean, he talked about how Android's a problem because Google's going to move away from the open and start closing things down to get control over it. And to back that up, claimed that's why they hate Facebook Home and are going to try and block it. Meanwhile, at the exact same conference, Eric Schmidt was praising Facebook Home. And I think the reason why Google likes Facebook Home is because it's showing the rest of the OEMs. Because at this point, Facebook essentially is the OEM of the Facebook first phone, right? HTC in that capacity has gone back to what they used to do for Windows and Palm and just contract make the phone. So that's Facebook's offering. It is stock Android with one application. They didn't rip apart the Android framework to make it do what they want to do. They wrote one application that runs on top of the core framework. So you can't say that Google isn't putting out a stable platform that all of these other companies just have to do all of this crap to in order to make it work. Because they don't. Google's putting out a stable platform. Everybody else is still stuck in this mindset that they're on donut and that they need to do that. So it's a problem with these other OEMs. Everything in TouchWiz could be boiled down to a highly customized launcher and then additional plug-in apps. Those apps don't need core TouchWiz framework to run, or at least they shouldn't. They do now, but all of that framework could be broken out into the app.
Okay. All right, so if you have any additional points you'd like to add to this discussion, let us know in the comments, either on YouTube or Google+, and we'll check them out here in a little bit. We're going to mention our giveaway this week for those of you that are just tuning in now, tuning in a little bit late. So if you have a Galaxy S3 or you know somebody that does, you want to hook them up with something that's unique, we are giving away 10 of these special clip-on, snap-on cases. They are officially licensed art by Tats Crew. Tats Crew, to put it shortly, is a graffiti artist, professional graffiti artist. They've been doing it for 30 years or so. And they've been commissioned by institutions in New York, museums, schools, and major companies. So these are one of a kind. You can't get them anywhere else. They're only for the Galaxy S3. We have 10 of them to give away. And if you share this post or share a new post with hashtag Android Authority, we will add that to the queue and pick a winner after the show at some point, and we'll let you know.
And for those of you watching on YouTube that are wondering what post, the Google Plus page, Android Authority Google Plus page, the YouTube link on that post.
Look at that, Scott's on top of things. He is. That's why he's in his hangout right now.
Derek, can you keep that thing there the whole time, just so we don't,
So I could hold this here so you don't see my face.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, I can put it over here. We give best of both worlds, All right. So, anyways, enough about this. We'll talk about this one more time. We don't need to hold it up in front of my beautiful face the entire time, as Scott said. All right. So let's yell about some other news.
Are we yelling?
Well, let's talk constructively.
Ooh, I like that better.
So, Dan, you had some Samsung infos for us?
Yeah, so Samsung's gotten into some hot water in Taiwan, apparently, after people found out that they have been paying people to anonymously write negative reviews about HTC all over the web. They didn't necessarily admit to doing this, but they did promise to no longer do it in the future. So they kind of implied that it was going on without saying, "Oh yes, we've been doing this."
Yeah, we won't do that anymore. I mean, we didn't do it in the past,
Right.
but we're not going to do it anymore.
Yes.
You know what? In Samsung's defense, I would bet money that they aren't the only company that's ever done this.
I'm certainly not the only company that's ever done this. Although most companies do it proactively. Most companies pay bloggers to write positive stuff about them. They don't pay bloggers to write negative stuff about their competitors.
Oh, come on now. What about Florian Muller?
There are some exceptions, but by and large, it's a PR proactive. It's not just a smear campaign.
Yeah.
It's not always scroogled.
Scroogled. All right, so we have some other device news, Dan?
Yes. So yeah, their big flagship phone, everybody I know is waiting to hear when it's coming to them, when it's coming to their carrier in particular. And so we've gotten official dates from 4 of the 6 largest carriers. That's T-Mobile is going to be the first of them. It will be available on the 24th, which is, what, Tuesday, Thursday, next week. So next week, you can get it for a $150 down payment with 2 years of $20 monthly payments, which actually shakes out to $630 over the course of 2 years versus a $640 list price for the phone. So really not bad financing on the phone. And obviously that's separate from the contract, and you can sell the phone back to T-Mobile with their uncarrier strategy. Sprint is going to be the next one out. You can get it from them on the 27th of April. It'll be $250 with a 2-year contract, but you can get a $100 discount if you're switching to Sprint from another carrier. I don't know how they verify that you're switching to Sprint from another carrier. You may have to port your number or something, but you can get it for as low as $150.
A bill, maybe.
Yeah, you can get as low as $150 there, so that's good. One of the bigger unconfirmed still is Verizon. They've confirmed that it will be in May, which is rather late, but they haven't specified a date. There are various rumors suggesting it could be the 30th of May, based on a Staples internal document. But they've also called a press conference for the 22nd of May, so that also seems like a likely date. AT&T, meanwhile, has announced officially the 30th of April for $200 on a 2-year contract, or $450 on a 1-year contract. And U.S. Cellular has also confirmed the 14th of May for $200 on a 2-year contract. So if you want the S4, you can get it. HTC One dates are still very nebulous. Rumors suggest that it'll be launching on T-Mobile at least the same day as the S4. Other carriers, it's still murkier when or if it will appear.
Okay.
So John, what about Motorola for some other OEM news here?
Yeah, not so much for Motorola themselves, but Eric Schmidt and Larry Page both spoke at different conferences this week, and they both pretty heavily praised Motorola's upcoming lineup. Schmidt was at the All Things D-Mobile conference, and he called the lineup phenomenal. And Larry Page stated that, and this was during Google's earnings call, that he was pretty enthusiastic about the upcoming lineup. And he specifically said, think about your device. Battery life is a challenge for most people. You shouldn't need to carry around a charger to make it through the day. If your kid spills their drink on your tablet, the screen shouldn't die, and when you drop your phone, it shouldn't shatter. And he said, having just seen Motorola's upcoming products myself, I'm really excited about the potential there. In just under a year, they've accomplished a lot and have impressive velocity and execution. So some pretty encouraging words coming from that, and news this week that Motorola is going to be pushing stock Android in the upcoming future. It does make me wonder a little bit when they say upcoming lineup, if they're talking about something that's this year or they mean down the road, because it typically takes a lot longer to get a phone on the market than something like a tablet. But then again, when they made the Nexus 7, you remember them talking about Google and Asus working day and night for, I think, a 4-month time frame to make sure.
It was a very short time frame.
It's going to be interesting to see what Motorola has been able to accomplish, even with a kind of what already was a hardware cycle that was in the works before Google acquired them. But things could happen. Maybe they've got something really compelling coming out this year that you should expect to see, and definitely keep your eye on Motorola this year. But I do think even without it being 100% Google influence, they're going to come out swinging.
Yeah, it'd definitely be nice to see something, positive and energetic coming out of Motorola for a change.
I'm excited. I'm excited. I can't wait for the next plausible rumor to unfold. All right, so let's talk about some ecosystem news here, and we'll talk about some apps, everybody's favorite boring section of the show, right? All right, so Amazon, they're lacking something major compared to Google when it comes to voice search. They don't have it, and compared to iOS, they just don't have the same features. Google Now and all that good stuff. So there's evidence showing that they are looking to buy a Siri alternative. Now, did we say this? EVI? EVI?
I don't know.
We'll call it EV. Okay, EV. So they're looking to buy a Siri alternative. So that's interesting. For those of you that are embedded in the Amazon ecosystem and have Kindle Fires, you might be getting some neat stuff for voice in the future. And the Google Play Store app revenue is up 90% in first quarter 2013. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Making money in the Google Play Store, which the Play Store has been under scrutiny in the past that it doesn't make any money. So having it be up 90% after the holiday, when typically a lot of people don't spend money, because they spent tons of money over the holiday in Q4 of last year. Yep. So that's great that it's up that much the first quarter. I find that very, very respectable.
Support your developers, because this is why we're getting compelling, really good applications lately, is because developers needed to know that they can monetize the platform.
Yeah.
And so if you're into giving money to charities and you wanted to do it with Android...
They're not charities, they're companies. They're selling you a product.
Non-profits, I'm sorry.
They're not non-profits, they're companies.
Okay. Anyways, if you want to donate money to the charity of your choice...
Oh. This is non-profits, yes. Sorry, I thought you were still talking about...
All right, this is where... Dan, you were wrong on the show. Everybody documented the date is 4/18/2013 at 10:01 p.m.
When a year comes around, I'm going to mention it, and you're going to start crying.
So unbeknownst to Dan, there is a new app on the Google Play Store. Maybe I should have entered with that.
Not unbeknownst to Dan, I just didn't.
All right, so this new app allows you to donate to the charity of your choice, non-profits. It's a limited beta app. You have to sign into the app and request to be put on the waiting list. But you can donate $1 directly to a charity of your choice, and you can do it through a new app from Google. It's called One Today.
So when you say a charity of my choice, is that a charity of my choice off of some list that's been pre-established, or is that just any charity that I name?
I believe it is off a pre-configured list.
So how does a charity get involved? How can
that is the question, I guess.
Since this app was just released, this is breaking app news. Yeah, I am not sure. Just mentioning it because it's a worthy mention. It's a new Google app.
Oh, and just to let you know, there's a 1.9% credit card fee.
Okay. All right, so Chrome Beta, Chrome Beta gets updated every week. Yeah, whatever. Chrome Beta. Yay, it's getting better and faster and bigger and stronger, and we love it. WordPress gets a little bit of hollow. So those of you that have a WordPress blog, and you use your Android device to do some WordPress action, you probably already updated and you know what I'm talking about right now. But there's a little bit of hollow, it's good. Major UI overhaul. And speaking of doing some hollow, LinkedIn gets a hollow-esque app, a completely newly redesigned UI. So if you're into LinkedIn for business social networking connections, you can now do it properly, I guess, with a nicer UI. Now, on the opposite side of this spectrum here, Microsoft's Outlook.com was updated. It doesn't look like Android 1.5 anymore. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like, Android from 5 years ago anymore. It doesn't look like really Android at all. It actually looks like Office 2013. So if you're using Outlook 2013 right now, that's pretty much what the Outlook.com app looks like. Or if you have an Outlook.com email address, it looks all the same. And so some people might say, "Oh, it's on Android. It doesn't have an Android UI." Well, you know what? It's Microsoft's UI, and they're unifying it across devices and platforms, and that's awesome. So
Microsoft's doing something across platforms. Round of applause, please.
Yeah, that hats off to them. That's cool. I'm glad they're doing
Linux, that. They've been crying for that forever. So maybe they'll get it.
So Google Voice, get ready for it. Google Voice was actually updated. I mean, it's an app that never gets updated. Like we had Google TV remote get updated. Like what was it, a couple weeks ago, and now Google Voice. Like it's nice to see some love for some apps that never get updated. Oh my God, the update. What did it do? Well, not a whole lot. So SMS delivery improvements, maybe related to integration to Glass. Who knows? But anything that's an improvement is obviously good. So let's talk about Glass real quick. So a new app launched this week, and it wasn't a charity app. It was for Glass, called My Glass, and My Glass allows you to set up Wi-Fi for your Glass, manage your Glass. You create a QR code, and you hold the phone up with your Glass, and you look at the QR code, and hey, you connect to your. That's how Glass connects to Wi-Fi, through looking at a QR code. If you want to send messages to contacts or hang out with contacts, you need to manage those contacts. You can do it through the My Glass Android app or the My Glass website. But you can, like I said, you can do it through the app. Manage your contacts. Interesting, it has permissions for Google Voice. So it actually has, Google Voice, some type of Google Voice integration. And related to that, Glass will use My Glass to send text messages. And if you don't have My Glass installed, or you're on a device that, like an iPhone, whenever you say "OK Glass, message contact," it'll actually be an email. It won't be SMS. You actually need My Glass to do that. My Glass is actually, surprisingly, it's actually very, very dependent. Or Glass is very, very dependent on My Glass. It gets your location data, in GPS through the app as well, since Glass doesn't have. The FCC filing said it had GPS, but the official tech specs do not mention GPS. So Glass gets the location data from the app. That's actually pretty relevant. So that means that right now there is no iOS app. So that means that you can't do a lot of the features. And what's interesting is to see people mentioning this that are currently iPhone users saying, "Huh, looks like I'm switching to Android," because they want the integration for navigation, and they want the integration for text messaging and stuff like that. And who knows what else is going to come down the line that is only going to be available for Android. So that's interesting that you find that out day one this week. Android Police did a APK teardown. They extract the APK. They look through all the code strings and folders and everything, and they found some neat stuff. Apparently, Google Games looks like very close to being, launched. Google Games was initially, I'll say, mentioned a year or so ago, where they said, a Googler said, a year from now, we won't talk about Chrome games and Android games and Google Plus games. We're just going to say Google Games. And we said, oh, that's neat. Wonder what that means. And finally, we have some more insight into that. So what did Ron from Android Police find out? Well, he found out that there's going to be real-time multiplayer games in this game center or game service. There's going to be turn-based multiplayer games. There's going to be in-game chat as well as a lobby.
In-game chat? Yet another chat from Google?
Oh, God, I didn't even think
We tried to go the other direction.
You know what? Maybe it's going to be
Babel-based chat.
Yeah, maybe it'll be Babel-based. Who knows? But
if that integrated into that'd be pretty cool.
So there's going to be achievements and leaderboards, and of course you can invite your friends to a game. So those of you that do Android gaming, Google gaming, whatever you want to call it, that's neat. I don't do a lot of it, but I know a lot of you do. So congratulations, Android gamers. Who knows when it's coming? Maybe I/O. Maybe we'll find out something at I/O.
Really, congratulations.
If you like to do news, save stuff for later. Press got some major updates this week with widgets. So Scott, as our resident AOKP fan, the man down with the pink unicorn, AOKP had some news this week. Want to tell us what's on AOKP's front?
All right, so first they released Jelly Bean MR1 Milestone 1. This is the first milestone that they've had for Jelly Bean, which is basically a whole bunch of bug fixes and also new toggles, reboot and screenshot from the toggles, which is kind of nice and very organized from there. A lot of bug fixes, no reboots, things like that, just nice and clean. They have 1 million downloads, which is a milestone. I think that's why they released a milestone. They also released an app called AOK Push, and basically what that is you can subscribe. It's an app. It's basically kind of like a donate app. You can subscribe to feeds. The feeds that you can subscribe to are the nightly feed, a test feed, and a milestone feed, and then there's also a fun feed. So basically, they have a new release cycle. Nightlies are going to be released every 4 days, which hasn't happened before. It hasn't been this quick for a release cycle, which is awesome. And then milestones at least once a month. And yeah, some awesome stuff. So quicker releases. It's what I wanted.
So we have Joe Hindy right now watching this. He's the Android Authority app guy. And, Joe, when I said the boring part of the show was apps, I didn't mean that, your whole entire, what you do is boring. I just meant our show. Your app reviews are great. You do a good job. We weren't. I wasn't laying the smack down on you. Maybe. I'm kidding. We were. No, Joe. I really like your. I like how you go out there and you find the underdog. The diamonds in the rough. The apps that aren't on the top 50. Downloads. That people have sometimes a tendency to not find. So that's nice. Help give some lonely developers a few bucks. Maybe you can. Maybe interview some of these lonely developers in a future segment. How about that? See, look at that. See this show is good. This segment is actually good for you, Joe. Anyways, all right, enough rambling on it. You guys don't even care about what I'm talking about. All right, so let's move on to some news. Dan, carriers do LTE and other things, right?
Yeah, so last week we mentioned that Sprint was rumored to be launching LTE in some 21 cities. Today they made that official. They also that actually brings them up to a total of 88 cities that they cover. So it's kind of a lot, but kind of not really. They're promising some 170 plus in the next few months, and they also today named 33 of those. So that's a pretty big chunk. They're building. It's slow. Their LTE is slow. Kind of a bummer for Sprint users.
Can't be as bad as the 3G though.
Yeah.
I prefer Edge.
Yeah, I prefer.
Some people can only get Edge
because it's faster than Sprint's LTE. But Verizon is also expanding their LTE footprint. Derek Ross is finally on the list, and he can whine about that in his posts on G+, all on his own. But meanwhile, some 90,000 people have signed an online petition asking Verizon to end their contracts. I really doubt that's going to go anywhere, but that is a crap load of people.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
But that's funny. That's what the CEO of Verizon actually said. He's like, if people want to get rid of their contracts, yeah, let us know. And then boom,
Yeah, boom, 90,000 people
boom,
said
90,000
yes,
people are
us.
like, we called you bluff.
So what they're going to do is keep the share plans. It simply be like prepaid, and they're just going to stop subsidizing phones and think that's what people really want.
Yeah, no, they're going to let you pay full price for the phone and then charge more for the service.
Yeah, exactly. Then pay the exact same prices that you're paying now.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's going to be terrible. Meanwhile, though, Verizon is rumored to be trying to lease or potentially buy some $1.5 billion worth of spectrum from Clearwire, which could certainly help them out of their financial woes if Sprint ends up not having the cash to keep bailing them out. And speaking of Sprint and getting bailed out, we all know that SoftBank had made a little over a $20 billion offer to buy Sprint, and they still claim that that deal is going to close by July 1st of this year. But Dish Network surprised everybody by dropping a $25.5 billion bid on Sprint. So there's certainly some competition to buy Sprint now that it's clear that they're on the market. So yeah, Dish Network desperately trying to buy their way into the cell phone market. Meanwhile, SoftBank trying to buy their way into the U.S. They have suggested that they are willing to pony up some extra cash since their bid is about $5.5 billion short of Dish's. Even if SoftBank loses, though, they stand to make about $4 billion off the deal. Only it's not like the AT&T T-Mobile buyout where AT&T had to fork over tons of cash. Sprint's only going to lose about $600 million out of that, and then there are other sort of related things that SoftBank will do to make a crap load of additional money off of it. So either way, SoftBank is going to be fine, but it'd definitely be interesting to see Dish Network jump into the carrier market like that. And then in some other entertaining industry news in the world of patents, in the never-ending Apple v. Samsung trial, the first one, Apple has filed yet more briefs arguing why they need to move forward immediately with the retrial on damages and why it would be horribly prejudicial to Apple if they didn't. Basically, Apple's argument boils down to, even if our patents get invalidated by the Patent and Trade Office, we still deserve to get paid for the infringement because the jury found it to be infringing. So even if these patents are totally and completely bogus, Samsung should still have to pay us money. And they're arguing it's about protecting their intellectual property. No, it's obviously about hurting their competition. This is really just getting ridiculous, how obvious it is that Apple is just out to hurt its competition.
Is it that surprising, though?
I'm sorry?
Is it that surprising? I mean, the other companies that they're attacking are, ultimately hurting them by taking their market share, and they're just trying to stop the bleeding. And this is basically all they can do because they're not going to release another product, more than once a year. But
I mean, they could, though. They have that opportunity. To say they couldn't do anything else is ridiculous because they could. They're sitting on $100 billion in cash. They could do whatever they want.
they like sitting on it.
Sure, but don't blame my need to sit on more cash than the entire United States government has on hand as the reason why I couldn't possibly release another device.
It's true.
Apple has other options. And really the terrible thing of this is Apple's spending an exorbitant amount of money to go after all of these other companies, and the end result is going to be Apple losing patents and losing trademarks on things that never should have been granted in the first place, right? Up until the point when all of these companies went on this rampage of sue the crap out of each other for patents, people got patents on ridiculous crap because everybody knew the U.S. Patent and Trade Office just rubber stamps every piece of paper that comes through the office. But people weren't going around suing on them because they knew that they were crap, right? Somebody's going to challenge this patent. We're going to lose the patent. We stand in a better position by sitting here saying, oh, we hold the patent on this and not suing people about it. Apple chose to buck that trend, and they're going to lose the patents for it. Right? They lost Slide to Unlock in Germany. They're losing Bounce Back here, losing Slide to Unlock here. They're losing most of their other gesture-related or shape-related patents here. It's going to end up with Apple not having the ammunition that they think they do.
I agree.
Think about what Apple could have bought with that amount of money. They could have bought their own foundries and made their own hardware by now,
Yeah.
and made a ludicrous amount of profit.
They could buy Qualcomm.
Yeah.
Cash. In hard cash, they could buy out every stock of Qualcomm. They could launch a hostile takeover of Intel.
I don't want them to.
So Dan, we have a question here from Shane Moore. What do you think of the ACLU suit against carriers and phone companies against Android's update progression?
I mean, I think they're getting really to the crux of the problem. The carriers are saying that we have to do all of this stuff in order to support these devices. And the carriers have a legitimate position here because Verizon shouldn't need to support Samsung's 47,000 devices that they're selling tomorrow, HTC's 12, Motorola's 3 or 4, ZTE, Huawei. You know, you've got how many different Android OEMs, and you're asking Verizon to support all of these and all of their different devices. That is an unrealistic expectation of Verizon and of AT&T and Sprint and T-Mobile. It's unrealistic to expect them to do that. Nobody expects them to do that with iOS. That's why Apple can roll out the updates faster, because they're doing the testing. They're doing the quality assurance. They aren't relying on Verizon to do that. They aren't relying on Verizon for that first level support. And so, you know, when the carriers make these claims about needing to protect their network and needing to do all this crap to support all their users, they're right, because they're being expected to offer all of that support, right? When you have a problem with Windows, you go to Microsoft support. If you have a problem with the physical hardware in your computer, you go to Dell for support. You don't go to, you know, whoever's providing your internet because, you know, your computer's not working well today, right? It's not Comcast's fault that your Ethernet card died. It's whoever made your Ethernet card.
Yeah, true. And on the subject of carrier updates, it almost makes you wonder, because of the process of it and update queues, you know, they're taking that on themselves, whether it might not be better in the long run that carriers kind of outsource that testing, where like a third party were to take care of it, to a third party that really invested in having the resources to crank out really fast, instead of, you know, Verizon does it kind of as a prioritized, you know, the S3 is a really good selling phone, so the S3 is going to be ahead of, say, a Razr HD probably, or things like that. Whether if they outsourced it, they could really have a third party that gets this stuff done a lot quicker than Verizon or anyone else is capable of.
Yeah. No, and I mean, the OEMs make it harder for everybody too, because look at Samsung as an example. Just because they make so many different devices, the version of Android that ships on the Note 2 is not the same as the version of Android that ships on the S3, is not the same as the version that ships on the S3 Mini, is not the same as the version that ships on any one of their other devices. You look at Apple, they ship one operating system that runs on all of them. Samsung doesn't maintain one cohesive TouchWiz code base that is, you know, everything just branches out of it. They build a different one for each device. It's too compartmentalized within their company. The software stack build, everybody's building their own instead of everybody, you know, using the one Samsung Android and it being pervasive across all Samsung devices. Same thing with HTC. Same thing with Motorola. Same thing with all of them.
We have a user comment, Dan. Mark S. says, if they can't support the updates and support, then the Android name, then remove the Android name and go back to being a closed ecosystem. Just sell Nexus, and nobody will claim Android is a mess. But now, that gets, you know, that completely defeats the purpose of Android. Though the initial, you know, thought of Android was to be open, do it as open source, and get on as many devices as possible.
Yeah.
So that defeats one of the original visions and missions and goals with Android.
Yeah, I mean, the point is to allow companies like Samsung or like Xiaomi, for example, as a, you know, a niche company that's hoping to sell 10 million devices this year, right? They build their very own, very highly customized version of Android. They put it on their own devices that they manufacture and they sell them, and they do so successfully, right? But they maintain a cohesive platform. platform. The same version of MyUI that runs on the My 2 runs on the My 1. It's cohesive. They maintain their software stack. Samsung is free to make their own version and ship it, and they do, but they don't take appropriate care for their product.
So Dan, would you agree with me saying that Android's greatest strength is also Android's greatest weakness? That being open source.
Sure, and I think that that's true of any open source software, is that being open source is both a strength and a weakness. I think that's also true of proprietary software, though. I mean, I not to brush off the comment, but I think that it's true all over the place. Of course, bad things can happen because of open source software, but that's typically because somebody's not maintaining it.
So if people are doing their job, then it lessens that chance of happening.
Yeah, and when it comes down to it, is you have to look at whose job is it. I bought a device from HTC. Is it Google's job to maintain the code for the device that they don't know anything about the specifications on? They didn't build it. Why on earth should they be responsible for it?
Dan, and I have a great example of that.
They didn't build the device. They're not software engineers. They're not device engineers. Why aren't people going to HTC and saying, you're not providing me with a suitable fork of Android?
So Dan, AOSP, the Nexus line, doesn't have a lock screen bug. Various Samsung devices had a lock screen bug. That and Samsung's source is closed source. So that but obviously besides the kernel. But
Right.
yeah, so that solidifies that argument right there. That that. You can be closed source, and you can still have those exact same exact same issues, that just because it wasn't watched as closely or maintained as closely.
Yeah, but the difference there is Samsung is faced with this problem. We need to patch this bug. In order to do that, they have to patch the code of 47 different devices, and then push those out, get all 47 of them approved by hundreds of carriers all over the world, then get them rolled out to users, and deal with all the hassle of that. As opposed to Google maintaining AOSP, they push the update to AOSP, they push it to the source, and boom, it's filtered to all AOSP-based devices. Goes to the Nexus 4, goes to the Nexus 7, goes to the Nexus 10, goes to the Galaxy Nexus, goes to the Nexus S, goes to all of them at once. Same thing with iOS. Same thing with MIUI from Xiaomi. Right? That is the appropriate way to maintain your software. And that's not what Samsung does. They maintain 100 different silos for every individual project. And so pushing out one update to a fix in all of their underlying code requires 100 different silos to do the exact same thing. That's why you're getting slow updates. It's because the companies that are building these custom overlays aren't maintaining their software. And then you, the consumer, are left with the fallout from that.
And then the argument is, why maintain it when the lifespan of a device is so short, and and then you go to the fact that the contracts are long, and they have to keep the devices. Well, tough luck. Go with somebody that has a no carrier. Fork your money over right away. I mean, it's all avoidable if you really want to, but you have to be somewhat educated in order to actually do it, because nobody, I don't know.
I believe, John, you wanted to say something about this?
It's an interesting situation to be in. It's probably the first time in a software experience that this expectation has been put, because Microsoft, if you look at Windows, people are happy to be on XP. People are still on XP.
Yep.
You look at, this hardware-controlled model with phones is really the first example, and Android is often equated to Linux in terms of that whole deal. But the thing with Linux is Linux, unlike Android, doesn't have the advantage of applications that are compatible across the board. Linux's big Achilles heel has been the lack of a package manager that will work universally on, say, Ubuntu or Fedora. So, if Android was Linux, it doesn't matter if Samsung or HTC or whoever's, it doesn't, because it still runs the applications. So when you don't break third-party applications, that part of it still works. So where does open source come into play? It gets modified, and kind of like the lock screen bug like was mentioned, because it affects Samsung, it only affects Samsung users. It doesn't affect the whole ecosystem. Whereas with iOS, which also has a lock screen bug, it affects every single user in that ecosystem. So there's some obscurity that comes with open source that kind of, you could say, helps in that sense. Kind of like with a Linux distribution, if you're running Slackware, you're probably not going to get a virus, and you're probably not ever going to get a virus because nobody's going to invest effort to specifically exploit something that's so small or so broken from the rest of it. So when you kind of have everything a fully stacked deck in one, and that's the downside of closed source, is that when everybody is on this exact same thing, it's so much easier to target when it comes to vulnerabilities, when it comes to things like that. So, yeah. I mean, I do agree. Android's biggest strength is also its biggest weakness, but it's also a perceptual thing because this is really the first time that an open source operating system has reached the consumer level.
Yeah.
Where it just hasn't existed before at all, and the expectations and the perception of it is completely different than what you've seen from anything in the past.
Okay. Let me talk about this giveaway real quick here. I know if you've already watched me say it twice, well, you're gonna watch me do it one more time. All right. So, actually, no, you're not. I'm gonna hide my face. So we have these exclusive, rare, limited edition run that you can't get anywhere else. Galaxy S3 graffiti cases. They are officially licensed art by Tats Crew. Tats Crew has been doing professional, world-famous, Bronx-based murals and street graffiti, street art since the 1980s. They've been commissioned by New York institutions, museums, schools, and major corporations. These are slip-on, clip-on cases for the Galaxy S3. The retail price on them is $30 because it's all about the art. It's all about the art. So if you want one of these, we have 10 to give away. They're only for the Galaxy S3. What you need to do is share this post, make a new post using the hashtag Android Authority, and we will search for it later and award a winner.
How long is this contest open, Derek?
Why'd you have to ask it? No, I'll tell you what, since we have a lot of people that actually watch this and download it and listen to it over the weekend, it's actually in our best interest to let this run all weekend. So Sunday night, let's say 8 p.m. Sunday night, we will look for a winner. Eastern time, yes.
Is the giveaway open to anybody around the world?
No, the giveaway is only to people in the U.S. Sorry, Canada and everybody else.
We should push it to the next show.
We should push it to the next show?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. Since if we don't give them all away, we will.
All right. So remember, Google Plus page, the show that you're watching right now. That post, share it. Hashtag Android Authority when you share it, and you're entered.
Or just say, Scott Anderson is awesome. I wish to date him because I heard he was single in a post, and hashtag it, hashtag Android Authority. You might get a date, and you might get a free Galaxy S3 graffiti design case. Two things you could get. I mean, win-win.
Both for free.
Both for free.
Okay, well, you guys are watching us on YouTube. If you guys like what you're seeing, you can subscribe. Also, if you want to follow us, here are all the ways. So we're on SoundCloud if you don't want to watch us. Although we didn't see much of Derek tonight because he had the phone in front of him, which was, bearable. It was bearable. It was bearable, yeah. We're also on Google Currents. They have the MP3 podcast integration. You can just stream us from there. We're on Stitcher Radio, iTunes. We also do have an RSS feed that we do a post about every show and what we talked about and just kind of news in there. Anybody have anything to add?
Well, we didn't talk about Glass besides the Glass app, but people started getting Glass this week. Very cool.
Interesting conversation next week.
Yeah, I said a handful of people got it already. More and more people are going to be getting it over the next few days, and ultimately there'll be thousands and thousands of people that get it probably over the next month or two.
Did you see that video of the go-kart?
Of Josh Armour, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty
Very cool. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
I've been watching it. I'm excited. Jonathan Franklin and I are If I Had Glass contest winners, and so we don't know when we're going to be able to get it yet. I'm going to guess based on completely nothing and say June 1st, because that way it's a few weeks after I/O and things can die down a little bit for Google. But that's just me. Who knows when it'll be? But it's exciting times. All sorts of glass information is coming out. We got the official specs. We got how they just some insights into how glass actually works. How you can use it for voice commands and the trackpad and recording videos and taking pictures and so forth with people's consent. All sorts of neat stuff. So yeah. We'll obviously be talking more about glass as more and more develops in the near future, and especially when John and I do it here in like a month and a half or a month. Like we're gonna have Hangoutception. Like John and I are gonna be joining from our webcams, and then we're gonna join from glass too. So it'll be like Hangoutception or something. Either that, or we could do it MySpace style. John and I could go to the bathroom and stand there in front of the mirror, so you guys could see us in front of a mirror and just do the show through glass. Now the only thing is though, we got to practice our duck faces though, John.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, all right. So I'm being told to shut up. So, all right, guys, have a good night. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing and all the other good stuff. Have a good night.
Take it easy, guys.
Mega.